so that I know where to break with the segments. Our main topic of the week is, of course, the writers' strike, which officially started on Tuesday. And from what, yes, Ninjato, the weekly interruption. Um, from what I know about it, they're on strike due to low pay from a lot of the streaming services. They be it Netflix, Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, etc. And so they're trying to get more money out of there. Um, so this is the third writer's strike in my lifetime. Um, there might have been other writer's strikes before that. Can't really remember them right now, but or I'm not aware of them. And the the first one I'm thinking of was in the late '80s, and it was 88, 89, 89. And that was I don't know what they were striking about at the time, but I remember I know certain productions were affected by it, like Star Trek Five. Had some issues because of the writer's strike. Of course, that movie had other issues beyond the writer's strike. Um, but the one of the things I do remember though was with the Burbs, which is a really funny dark comedy with Tom Hanks. They didn't have they made that during the writer's strike, and so they couldn't do any rewrites, and they were encouraged to ad lib a lot. So a lot of the real scenes in there ad libbed, and then of course Chinggis mentions here. Yeah, I remember the last time there was a writer's strike. It spawned Transformers 2. Good times. So Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. Yeah, that came out during the writer's strike, and that wasn't very good. Of course, that wasn't the only thing affected from that. The season. I watched Heroes when it was on. Heroes was it was the first season of Heroes. Great show. And it's the first season of Heroes was brilliant. I loved it. And then during season 2, they had the writer's strike, and the season 2 was terrible. It was number one. It was shortened because of it had to be shortened because of the strike, and then and it wasn't a very good season, and that show never recovered. It was on for 2 more seasons after that, but it never recovered.
Pushing Daisies was another one that was killed by the last writer's strike.
Yeah. And
Actually,
another
the 2000s Justice League movie was partially killed by the writer's strike.
Right, that's right. I forgot. Yeah, it was George Miller, right? Was going to be directing it. Yeah. And Chinggis mentioned Transformers 2. Yeah, I am directly beneath enemy scrotum. Thank you, Michael Bay. And
I wonder if Michael argued, no, I should be allowed to continue filming because I never have writers anyway.
Yeah. Well, you do know who one of the writers was on the first 2 Transformers movies.
David S. Goyer?
No, Alex Kurtzman.
Kurtzman?
Yeah.
Was Transformers, Amazing Spider-Man, Star Trek.
Star Trek, yeah.
Monsterverse.
Yeah, it just ruins everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this current writer's strike that we've got is basically I was kind of describing it. It was mainly just from focusing on the streaming services, I believe, or I believe the trying to get more money out of them.
Yeah, there was a
what monster villain? It was the Mummy. Well,
Yeah,
I don't know if he might have. I don't know if he wrote it, but I know he directed it.
I think
Eh,
he was also like a major architect of that whole scheme.
Okay, yeah, and yeah, it was the Mummy with Tom Cruise.
Yep. So from what I've been reading and seeing, uh, basically there are a few major things. It's the writers being spooked by the possibility of Chat GPT taking their jobs,
Hmm.
which is understandable.
Yeah.
Because like I've been hearing this of some interesting things that people have been doing with that. Like you can ask it to. You would never want to put what Chat GPT wrote up as your final draft. But let's say hypothetically writing, let's say I'm hypothetically writing Amazing Spider-Man, and
Mm.
just 1 month I have no idea what to do because I just need like a one-shot story, and I could put it to Chat GPT. Hey, Chat GPT, uh, what Spider-Man villain should I use in my story? And ChatGPT would look out into its neural net and do like a Google search, and it would say, "Oh, you should have the Green Goblin. Okay, what should the Green Goblin do?" The Green Goblin, of course, I've used a little bit of ChatGPT, so it'd probably go, "The Green Goblin is Spider-Man's established villain from going back to 1960, whatever. Uh, you, among his other feats, he killed Gwen Stacy and has kidnapped other people on various occasions, so he might do that again." But so like, it isn't actually creative; it's just synthesizing its database.
Yeah. Ninja Toe says he was thinking of the Godzilla monster. Okay.
Oh no, I think it was called the Dark Universe. I
Oh,
think
Dark.
we're
Oh, that's right. You're right. Yeah, yeah. Dark Universe. Okay.
yeah.
But yeah, yeah. Everybody keeps getting all uppity about AI. I just don't. I'm not seeing it right now. It. Especially when it comes to like writing a movie or a TV show or anything like that. Like yeah, like because like you were saying, it's not creative. It's just giving out basic information.
Right, and there's some legal things around that, like what if the Chat GPT uses something that's copywritten, like it just recreates it.
Mm,
Uh, what I have heard is that some law firms have had some success having the Chat GPT write up a contract, and then the lawyer just has to review it and make sure it's all up to snuff.
mm.
But that's not creative. That's like
Yeah, that's
contracts
yeah.
are basically building blocks. There's like a lot of drudge work you have to do.
Right. Yeah.
Um, now the other th- now that's one of the concerns. The other concern is something that everyone's been talking about for ages on here on YouTube, and it seems like the rest of the financial press is getting up to speed finally.
Mm.
Is that uh, is that well, we're not making as much money from streaming as we did from TV. Pay us more.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah. And yeah.
the problem is that nobody's making money from streaming unless your name is Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah. It's which goes to show that we've talked about streaming before. It's just it's not a really a great money making tool, and you know yeah, it's a little different than like say the writer's strike, the last one that happened back in the late 2000s when that of course that whole thing was with DVD royalties. Um,
Right, because originally the Writers Guild allowed for very small DVD royalties on the theory that they were trying to make the technology more adopted.
mhm.
But then on that go around, they wanted to, okay, we did our introductory thing. Now give us more money. You're selling
Y-
a whole lot of DVDs.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but but yeah, I think we're gonna see a repeat of what happened with the last two writer strikes, which is movies that are already in production right now. They're still going to be in production, but they're probably not going to be able to do any rewrites,
Hmm.
or any rewrites that they do aren't going to be done by writers.
Hmm.
Case in point, Quantum of Solace, which was the second Daniel Craig Bond movie,
Hmm.
um, made during the writer's strike. They didn't have any writers there, so the rewrites were either done by the director or Daniel Craig. And if you've seen Quantum of Solace, it's definitely the bottom of the Daniel Craig era.
I remember enjoying it well enough, but I also wasn't. I was like, oh, another James Bond movie, and I'm watching it with friends on DVD years later.
Yeah.
Now, to kind of go back to the money thing, they had, in my opinion, the writers had some very unreasonable demands, but I also kind of see why they had some unreasonable demands. Because, let's see, there was a picture that I had pulled up. No, no. There was a picture. Okay, I apologize. I can't find it now. There was a
Yeah.
picture I had pulled up at one point where the writers, like, they were filling an entire street. Like, there were clearly hundreds or maybe even thousands of people there.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of smell the blood in the water on streaming, because the problem is that so streaming was basically bankrolled by the various studios as they all tried to make their own streaming services.
Hmm.
Netflix by itself only needs so many original programs, and so you'd have your TV shows go to like more traditional outlets
Hmm.
with a few Netflix originals and a few Hulu originals. Which is funny because like Hulu is super widely used. I can't think of anybody or the last time anybody brought up a Hulu original that wasn't that Prey movie.
Uh, the only thing I can think of would be like The Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, I see. Okay, I always forget and think that that's an Amazon one.
No, that I'm pretty sure that's Hulu.
I
Yeah.
think you're right.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's when those facts that no matter how many times you hear it, it's lodged in your brain wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Handmaid's Tale always feels like it should be an Amazon streaming show for some reason,
Yeah.
but that's neither here nor there. Um, so you had this big explosion in the number of TV shows being made for regular TV and for all these different streaming services people were trying to come up with. Well, we've been talking about how Zaslav, Chapek, and even Iger now are talking about, oh, we need to have quality instead of quantity. A lot of people were paying their rent on quantity. So
Yeah.
among the demands, well, we demand that all writers' rooms have a certain number of writers, whether they are needed or not.
Oh boy.
That sounds like them trying to make work.
Yeah. Uh, Turning into adult daycare.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So it's not great. It's this is kind of be so Hollywood is a sick patient. Hollywood is coming out of lockdowns and lots of production disruptions. It's a different beast than it was back in 2007 because 2007 you know pe- cable was still a thing.
Hmm.
Netflix, I think in 2007 Netflix might have been streaming a little bit, but it was still mostly mailing DVDs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Video games hadn't taken over to the extent they have today. So traditional media was still the way to be.
Yeah.
DVD sales were robust. There were DVD royalties to fight over,
Hmm.
and eh, I thought I had a fifth thing, but basically it was like the height of entertainment. And sure, it was right before the big financial panic back then, but
Yeah.
it was 2007. That was just kind of like distant rumblings and a few people who knew what a collateralized mortgage was sounding some alarms that were ignored.
Yeah.
But these are very different times. Like Hollywood is a sickly patient who's just getting out of the hospital, and this is like injecting air into their blood vessel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and of course, yeah, of course, this couldn't come at a worse like economic time because we are in a recession, regardless of what some people might say, and it's and of course, given the way a lot of people view Hollywood these days, from a political standpoint, this probably isn't the best time for something like this to be happening.
No, and this isn't. We're not interested in culture war stuff, but
Yeah.
it does seem like just to go on a brief tangent. It does seem like the whole Mulvaney thing with Bud Light is actually
Mm.
having a noted impact on Bud Light sales through all
Mhm.
channels.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I only bring that up not to comment on the rightness or wrongness of it,
Mhm.
but instead to point out that that would I would have okay. So Colin Kaepernick does the protests. People burn their Nike stuff out of protest, but
Yeah,
it didn't have any material long-term impact on Nike because I think people got distracted by the next shiny object and moved on.
yeah,
I think people are pissed enough now that buying decisions are actually changing when they
yeah,
get unhappy.
yeah.
So if the other thing is that there are way more options for where you can get TV and movies than there were back in 2007. And of course,
Mhm.
you've always had things like the BBC, other nationals things. But
Mhm.
let's say that I'm a Netflix executive trying to fill up things, and all my Netflix originals that are produced in the U.S. were just put on hold for 6 months or however long it takes to resolve this strike.
Yeah,
I can get on the phone and talk with Netflix Korea. Hey, what K dramas are there that we can get the rights to that we haven't put on our service yet?
yeah,
Thanks. Click. Hey, Studio NA or NHK over in Japan. Yeah, I hear that you're airing a new, I don't know, a new Super Sentai. How would you like to get? Yeah, that's basically Power Rangers. How would you like to get that on Netflix?
yeah,
But we can get an English dub and everything. Great, thanks.
yeah, yeah,
Hello, BBC.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I hear the British economy's in the toilet. How much for Doctor Who?
yeah,
Yeah, we want Doctor Who streaming rights. We can make it a brief thing. Yeah, take all that money you're putting into your originals and just go on a purchasing spree
yeah.
because you can outsource that now.
Very true. Yeah, yeah, and the other thing too is I saw on Twitter that they're bringing Phineas and Ferb back, and they're starting to write for it, and I'm going, wait a minute, I thought there was a writer strike. Well, animation writers are a different guild than the Writers Guild, so they're not on strike.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Now, animation has a longer turnaround, but yeah, you could. That's an option.
yeah,
So, so basically, and it's also it almost feels like the people at the buggy whip factory demanding better break rooms just as the car is coming out,
yeah,
or actually maybe more appropriately, it's like if they had a auto workers union strike in 2007 demanding cushier treatment than just as all those Toyota and Nissan factories down in Tennessee are really ramping up.
yeah.
I had a friend who worked there for a little bit at a Nissan plant in Tennessee. He made it sound very interesting.
Hmm.
Uh, Sadly, he lost his job after a few months because they couldn't actually keep up the supply chain.
Oh,
So they kept having like work stoppages, so it eventually just didn't become worthwhile to hold him and the other temps on.
That's too bad.
I would, really think about the animation we've been getting the last. Actually, for people listening, so the WGA
Yeah.
are cringe, while the Animation Writers Guild are based. Um, I'm gonna mention every, She-Ra, Steven Universe.
Masters of the Kevin Smith's Masters of the Universe.
Yeah, based is not the right word.
Yeah. The first 4 seasons of Voltron were good.
What happened in the fifth season?
I don't remember, but I just remember it not
Did,
being very good.
did they cave to fan demand and terrorist threats to make two of the characters gay?
Well, they made one of the characters gay, and one. I will say one of the characters, and it was actually in the first season. Um, Today would probably be considered non-binary. It'd be the one. It's the one wearing the character wearing green. If
Hmm.
you know anything about Voltron.
No, I watched some of the original, but I didn't really watch the new one.
Okay, it was Pidge. Pidge is actually a girl,
Hmm.
but they did kind of like a 12th Night thing where Pidge is pretending, where like Pidge is a girl pretending to be a boy.
Gotcha.
But then when they find out, even when they find out that Pidge is a girl, she still kind of acts like, still dresses and acts like a boy.
Okay.
So
Or at least non-conforming.
yeah, non-conforming. Yeah,
But okay.
yeah.
So it's on the one hand, I sympathize because they're seeing the writing on the wall. There's going to be a lot less need for content, which reminds me. Vita Ayala tweeted something, and this is the only time I can think of where I'm going to quote Vita Ayala as saying something reasonably intelligent.
Yeah.
It's a thought I've had for a little bit.
Yeah.
We conceded too much ground when we allowed art to be called content, to be honest, and I'm not sure if we can take it back. Now, note that despite the fact that Vita is a professional writer and the fact that Twitter has way more characters than it used to, TBH, to be honest, is abbreviated as TBH, and the sentence does not have a period.
Ah. Yeah.
There, I felt bad for citing Vita Ayala as a point, but it it was like, man, Vita Ayala had a point.
Yeah. Yeah. Every now and then, somebody not too bright can have a good day.
Because that is basically how they've treated movies and TV shows in the streaming era.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's not art. It's content. It's something to make money off of, and um
It's a
it's annoying
widget.
that. Oh yeah, 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 and I think like I said before, this will um it'll probably impact things that are already in production. It
Mhm.
will definitely delay certain TV shows and certain movies. You might have to wait a little longer for the next season of Stranger Thing. Whenever Stranger Things season 5 drops, you're probably gonna have to wait a little longer for it. I do remember in the other with the other strike, the 7th season of 24 got pushed back a year,
Mm.
which made me angry because I love 24. But yeah, so that all that stuff's happening, and of course, as you can see on the screen here, all of the late night shows are going to be shut down, and nothing of value is lost.
Yeah, and Holy Ninja points out a really positive aspect. A year
Yeah.
without Rings of Power is a good year, though that's being produced at least partially in the UK, so I'm not sure if they're affected or not.
Yeah, I actually saw. I think I saw somewhere on Twitter that they are going forward with season 2 without a showrunner or writers.
Yeah, couldn't go worse.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, I probably won't see any difference.
But and also apparently, what's his name? Jim Corbett. His
James
Corbin
Corden.
Corden. That's it. No, well, that jerk is losing his show because apparently it was $20 million underwater last year.
Man. You know what's sad is I actually kind of liked him for a little, for a time, and yeah.
I watched this whole video about like why do it asked the question, why do people hate him? And because like at first he seemed very genuine, and then like
Mhm.
it all just went to his head.
Yeah.
His humor wasn't necessarily based on being insightful; it was based on being relatable. Which means that if your shtick is based on being relatable and you suddenly aren't relatable, and, and throwing hissy fits at five-star restaurants in New York because there's a little bit of egg white in my wife's egg yolks.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Chengus says, yeah, late night shows shutting down. Nature is healing.
Yeah, I mean, okay, late. The other thing about AI that's kind of interesting is that I've seen some really. Okay, so did you happen to see that AI animation that was going around a few months back, where the AI animated two guys playing rock paper scissors?
Yes.
Like, okay, so in my humble opinion, that wasn't a very good video on its own. Just as like a demonstration of the technology, that was really impressive what you could make happen.
Yeah.
So there's, and that was like, that was way cheaper than hiring a whole studio worth of animators to do that.
Mhm.
So we AI, like, it is going to kind of, I've heard people say democratize storytelling, which sounds like such a pretentious way of putting it. It basically just means that in theory anybody can do their own thing. The,
Yeah.
the same way that Kindle desktop publishing or Kindle direct publishing means that any jerk who can properly format a book can put it up on Amazon. And I can barely properly format a book, so
Yeah.
this could make adequate movie making accessible to anybody who's willing to learn some skills.
Yeah. Yeah. And it it could get interesting. Um, just from a especially for independent filmmakers, who are just trying to make any sort of film on a very tight budget. I mean, it's you know can make things a lot more simpler for them.
Yeah, imagine a world where, say, you and I could, yeah, like we've never met in person. Imagine a world where we could sit down, plug away at an AI for 3 months, and come up with a movie with five characters.
Mm.
None of us have to actually act or voice those characters.
Yeah,
Now, it's not going to be as good as a real movie, but it would probably be good enough to take to a studio or something and go, "Hey, you think we have something here?"
yeah, yeah. Little test footage.
Yeah. So, and I think that's the other thing is that what the writers have realized, and that might actually be part of why like I was mentioning why they're demanding the extra seats at the writers' room, whether they're needed or not. Not only is the supply in Hollywood contracting, um, the ability for people in other parts of the world and of different means to start making TV and movies
Hmm.
has never been greater than it is right now.
Yeah,
Also, in a world where the critical drinker can have Russell Crowe on his show, hey, and actually, let's look this up. YouTube critical drinker. Eh, let's find that Russell Crowe interview. How many? Yeah. So in a world where Russell Crowe could sit down with the critical drinker and they get 709,000 views. Uh, and let's see here. Let's see here. Stephen Colbert. Let's take a look. See here. Let's take a look at the late show Stephen Colbert.
yeah.
Let's see here. What's the Nicolas Cage takes on Colbert questionnaire? Okay, so Critical Drinker for having Russell Crowe on his program for an hour got 700,000 views.
Hmm.
Nicholas Nicholas Cage on Stephen Colbert got 428,000 views.
Oof.
And this is on YouTube where you don't even have to have a subscription.
Yeah.
So, especially for like the late night shtick, any idiot, with the camera
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
know.
and a StreamYard connection can have a talk show.
Yeah.
And if you can get big enough, like the Critical Drinker, actual stars will show up and attempt to save their failing horror movies.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I, the late night shows in particular are a dying breed because, like, what's the point of them? You can get the same thing out of live stream. Oh, also, that was like an 8-minute clip on Stephen Colbert. It was an hour interview, which means that, and this is what I've noticed about YouTube news versus TV news. Daniel, when was the last time you watched like an evening news program?
Oh God. Uh, like I would say probably close to 10 years at least.
It was a little more recent for me because I was living with my parents,
Yeah.
and what I can tell you is that they just go into no detail on anything.
Right.
Like, like I remember, like, in other news, a report says that parts of the Steele dossier uh, been confirmed. In other news, like, wait, what parts?
Yeah.
Who confirmed? Who gave the report?
Yeah. Yeah.
At this point, I'm much more interested in watching. Like, I would rather do a deep dive on a topic for like half an hour to an hour, rather than just get random highlights with no ability to dig deeper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, So it's like that whole style is just seems so quaint at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. I remember. I think the last time I watched, actually, it may have been longer. Like I remember watching the whatever ABC News at my grandparents' house. Like, of course, because that was my grandparents. They still watched the nightly news for a half an hour every night because that was just what people that generation. Like our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation. That's what they did.
Yeah, I think part of it is that it's because we're so suspicious anymore. Like,
Yeah.
if I trust a source, like if it was somebody I really trusted to actually do their research and legwork, I could buy something like the half hour news and say, "Oh, that's nice to know. Oh, that's nice
Yeah.
to know. That's nice to know. Oh, that's a neat little human interest story. Oh, that's nice to know."
Yeah.
But if I'm like, says who, why, when,
Yeah.
it gets very frustrating very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like somebody once said, oh well, Christian scientists aren't Christians. Oh, why? And they couldn't really tell me. Now, mind you, they really aren't after looking into their doctrines some. But it's like, if you make an assertion to me, I've always, like, just from a young age had a tendency to ask a question. I'm not like a being a jerk. It's like, okay, I want to know. Tell me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I was primed for the internet age before I even knew what an internet was.
Yeah.
But
uh,
yeah. So yeah. So speaking of evening news, Writers Guild shoots self in foot. Film at 11 because
yes.
they want to share the non-existent streaming profits, and the studios don't want to admit what these streaming shows are actually worth to them because there'd be a lot of red ink.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Well, I think that's a good place to end for the week. Although next week we're having a special guest.
Yes. Yeah. And a returning guest too. Edwin Acevedo, who wrote the Ace. He's going to be joining us next week to talk about his new comic book. So
Excellent. And if you need something to tide you over comic book wise until then, Daniel's Kickstarter is still open.
yes, yeah, and the Indiegogo as well. Um, and if you've got novels that you want to read, Confessions of the Magpie Wizard books 1 through 4 are on Amazon from DB here.
Yep, and book 6 is in production. Book 5 is up available for places to read for free. I have more things coming, so we'll talk about that when the time comes.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it as always. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already.